Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alice Siragusa. I work for the Joint Research Center. I will present this as a follow-up of the introduction and Annika's presentation. I will give you some, we will present some information on why this is important, basically, and what European cities and regions are doing and how this integrates basically with other actions that are taken at local level, because at the end this is the important point. But we will focus a lot on numbers, indicators, and how to use this type of information and knowledge in the work. So be patient with us if we take a lot about numbers. I will share the presentation now. And of course, this one. Okay. Okay, do you confirm you see the screen? Yes, great.
Yes.
Okay, as I said, I'm Alice. I'm a team leader in the Territorial Development Unit of the JRC. And then Paola will, I think, introduce herself later. We work in the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. That is the Science and Knowledge Service of the Commission. I'm based in Seville, one of the sites of where the JRC is located. Together with us today, there are also a couple of colleagues from my team, Iraklis and Margarita, while Paola is based in Seville. We are about 3,000 researchers located in different sites in Europe. The headquarters are in Brussels, of course. We cover a lot of topics in the JRC, from economy, social science, nuclear energy, and of course, this wealth of knowledge produced by all these researchers comes on hand when we talk about the SDGs that, as Annika pointed out, covers a lot of topics. So in particular, in our team, we work on the local monitoring of the SDGs, which means we try to understand and provide knowledge and support on how to monitor and evaluating the achievement of the goals at subnational level. How we do it, we try to improve and test new methods and tools and new data as well. These activities have been developed over the last 4 years already. And we also cooperated with DG Reg, of course, and as Annika mentioned, with a twin project with UN Habitat. And I will present some activities, and Paula will go into detail of some specific products and tools that you might use in our work. The rationale for us is really that, as pointed out before, there is still a lack of knowledge on how to adapt the agenda basically to the local level, and also what is the territorial dimension of the SDGs. But one thing is sure, if all levels of governments, if they don't cooperate, it's very hard to achieve the goals. This is clear. So the goal for us is really to impact how local governments deliver the SDGs, how they integrate this framework, if this framework is useful for them to design better actions and more sustainable actions. So who localized the SDGs? For sure, local governments and institutions, but also academia, the civil society, the private sector, religious community organization, but even individual citizens at the end, because every action taken in a place has consequences. And how up to now local and regional governments have localized the SDGs in different ways and in different degrees. There is a first level, we can say, that is the awareness rising. So basically you have trainings or information session like this one delivers to public officials or politicians, and also awareness raising campaigns to citizens on sustainability and the agenda. Then there is a second level, which is a little bit more complicated, which is the mapping exercise. So to identify which actions contribute to specific goals. So you might have a mobility plan, for example, in a city. Of course, this contributes to the target on local transport or local mobility. And this mapping exercise usually involves all city departments or local regional departments, because you need to map all the actions to cover the different SDGs. There is a third layer in which the local, subnational, the local governments try to assess their achievement of the SDGs. And as Annika mentioned before, this is done through a process which is called voluntary local review of the SDGs. This process of measuring and assessing the achievement and the impact of policy means that you need the cooperation of all this is not only awareness, but it's a cooperation of different cities departments. It entails also accountability and transparency. And of course, it involves an engagement with a global movement of actors and stakeholders that localize the SDGs. The fourth level is a level in which all these processes are encompasses, and you have a full alignment of the SDGs into the strategic plan or the actions. So of course, this as is voluntary, every region or cities can choose which level of engagement or action can take. Actually, in Europe, we had the first subnational government, the Basque Country, which in 2017 published the first monitoring report in the world, while the first city to present a local voluntary review was New York, has also House of the United Nations Secretary General in New York, of course. So after that, a number of local, regional governments produce similar reviews, and these are very important because they actually assess how they were doing on different goals, what were the achievements, and using a different type of indicators. And of course, they could not easily use the ones that were designed for the country level, because if you, of course, they are different. So how different stakeholders are involved in this process? First level is that usually there has to be a political leadership, the mayor or the president of the region or whatever. Then there is a political leadership that leads the process or kick off the process. Of course, there are some resources needed, financial, time, human resources. But there is a central role of institutions, but with multi-level governance, because of course, since, for example, for the assessment at the regional level, you might involve different bodies, both in the assessment, in the monitoring, and in the implementation of the strategic plan. It is possible also to externalize this assessment, the monitoring, to an external body, maybe a university, a local university that has the resources, capacity to do it also with a sort of neutrality. So it has had some advantages and some cons, let's say. One important element is that over time, this process of monitoring the SDGs, localizing the SDGs, has become more and more a co-creation, more than an assessment done only by the governments or one department, for example, the environmental department. This new type of evolution over time involves many questions and criticalities. For example, which are the stakeholders involved, at what stage you involve them, why, how, when. So, and this is a very interesting elements of the evolution over the last couple of years of these tools. Of course, when any local governments take the initiative to monitoring the SDGs, they have in mind some benefits, why you have to do something voluntary, especially if nobody gives you money to do it, or there is no legal obligation. There are, of course, external benefits. If you are part of a global movement, you might raise attention on, in Europe, for example, on action taken in the city or the region. There are also some external benefits in terms of local scale, because you engage with stakeholders that you might want to have at the table. And of course, there are also benefits internally, because working on the framework of the SDGs, since it covers so many fields, you need a cooperation, and you have to break the silos in your administration to sit at the table, collect the data, analyze the table in a, let's say, a cooperative way. You see reflected this in the type of indicators, all these elements, in the type of indicators that the the local and regional governments use to monitor the SDGs. For example, Barcelona published its first report in 2019, and as you see here, they use about 30% of the indicators collected at municipal level, degree ones. 1 year later, the second review, they have almost 3/4 of them that were collected locally. Why? Because they realize it over time that these instruments, this tool, enable them to really monitor it, also the action of the administration, and they included much more indicators, much more localized, collected by the city, instead of indicators, for example, provided by the national statistical offices, the blue ones. We see also that every city then has their own strategy on data collection. For example, Helsinki has more than half indicators collected at municipal level locally and half national, while Espoo and Turku, these are all Finnish cities, that's why we compare them here, they have completely different share and type of sources. So this is reflected in a way also on the priority that you have. It's clear that Barcelona over time is more focused on the internal benefit, the local internal benefit, and of the reviewing the SDGs. So this is a world map of the VLR published up to now. We have most of VLR's voluntary local review have been published by cities, but it's increasing. Of course, Europe is the region of the world where more cities have published VLR and regional governments. And there are some emerging trends also in region or specific countries when the member state, the country has developed a specific plan. So clearly, if there is guidance, this, let's say, increase the number of voluntary local review. On focus on Europe, quickly, I'm in the dark. There are some clusters of monitoring. Spain has a very strong commitment in the 2030 agenda and the new urban agenda as well. So we see that many regions and cities in Spain publish reports. We also mentioned the Scandinavian regions, that is, different countries are really committed to do it. And others, for example, in France, we have regional statistical offices who cooperate to establish a common set of indicators. So we have a lot of harmonized data sets at the regional level already published. Spain is the country at the moment with more VLRs. What is inside the VLR? These are the building blocks that we identify. There is opening statement, introduction, and let's say several parts on the policy enabling environment, highlights the methodology, but the core is the review of the SDGs. How it's done? There are two main parts. One is the statistical portrait of the progress, so indicators and analysis of the indicators. The second one is a qualitative collection of projects and initiatives that contribute to specific target or specific goals. So on this part, on the review and the statistical portrait, this was where, because basically the rest, every regions and cities can do it easily, or at least with some work, but it's based on own knowledge. While on the use of indicator and statistics for the SDGs at local level, that was a universe to explore. So a couple of years ago, more than 3 years ago already, we started a dedicated activity to support cities and local governments doing the VLR. And Paola will present what we have been doing. Paola, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alice. Good afternoon to everybody. As already mentioned by Alice, I'm Paola. I work in Alice's team in JRC ISPRA site. And today I will present you some of the products, some of the results that we have been obtaining in the last few years at the JRC, in order to support, especially, as Alicia mentioned, the statistical part, the more methodological part of the VLR. if we can go to the next slide, please. So the first research product we released to help cities in localizing the SDGs was the European Handbook. I guess some of you already saw this publication. Actually, in this publication, we offered for the first time, let's say, a framework to cities for a selection of indicators which could allow them both, let's say, to measure and to target local challenges, and both to compare themselves with other cities across Europe, because we suggested a framework of indicators composed of both comparable indicators, but also experimental ones, which were able to measure specific local challenges. Starting from this first, the release of this first framework, actually, we decided that we wanted to spend more time, let's say, to test the framework with a number of cities and other stakeholders in order to improve it, and to provide a more refined framework in 2 years from the first publication. So we started with doing another methodological, let's say, assessment, which could have helped us in improving this framework. And we analyzed, also thanks to the support of Andrea Ciambra from the University of Coruña, who collaborated with the JRC on this project. We analyzed all the VLRs published in the period between 2015 and 2021. Actually, the aim of this methodological assessment was really to understand which were the motivation behind the creation of monitoring effort and the creation of VLRs by different European cities, and also which was the mix of indicators that they were using in their own monitoring effort, also before the publication of our let's say, guiding framework. Because we have to remember that while now there are more and more publications also trying to support cities and regions to approach this monitoring effort, back in 2020 there were very few guidelines, and they were mostly targeting member states more than some national units. So after this first methodological assessment, after the publication of the European Handbook, we also did a second methodological studies in which we tested the framework and the collection of indicators itself we propose in the handbook. Why? Because we wanted to understand if the indicators we were suggesting to cities were really useful to them, were really easy to calculate, and were really easy also to interpret. So we started this work, which lasted about 1 year, with cities of Bratislava, Reggio Emilia, Oulu, Porto, Sevilla, and Valencia, all belonging to different contexts. And we try to understand with them how to improve the framework so to be really helpful for them. And all the results we obtained through this analysis are going to feed, let's say, the second edition of the European Handbook that I will present you in a moment. So apart from these other two methodological studies aimed at improving the framework, we also decided to do a thematic focus on the indicators that we were suggesting to cities and regions. Why? Because actually we were a bit inspired by a paper that was published by Canzutti et al. And was presented in the context of UNECE pre-meeting to the Regional Forum in 2021, in which actually they were saying that all the frameworks, all the guidelines, both at the country level and the regional and local level that had been published until that moment, didn't take the leaving no one behind principle as seriously as they should. So we took these results from their analysis very seriously, and we decided to analyze 24 cities across Europe, very different from the point of view of their context, dimension, but also from the point of view of their, let's say, engagement with the SDGs, because some, for example, already published the VLR and the strategy toward 2030, some only one of these two documents. And what we did, it was first to try to understand if the indicators they were using for monitoring the SDGs were disaggregated by different population groups, which could be considered vulnerable and so connected more with the leave no one behind principle. Then we selected a subsample of these 24, so 12 cities, and we ran with them a survey to understand also if inside, let's say, their strategies towards 2030, this population group were also mentioned and took into account. And finally, with another subsection of these cities, with 4 cities, we try to understand if these vulnerable groups and actions to improve their life condition were also included in the budget of the municipalities. Also through these activities, we got a lot of new insights that are going to fit the new version of the European Handbook, and you will understand in a second why. Finally, we also reread all the framework proposed in the European Handbook through the taxonomy that was published in the meanwhile by KS and Statistics Norway. We collaborated with them, and actually the publication of the taxonomy was useful for us to reflect more and to also refine the conceptualization that there was behind this framework. For example, according to the taxonomy, the user, so for example, local authorities or regional authorities, to select the framework more useful for them to do the monitoring effort in their territory, should look at 3 elements: goal, perspective, and quality of the indicator sets which are proposed by different entities. And actually reading the framework we propose in the European Handbook through these 3 categories, actually we were able to make even more clear actually that the handbook was useful especially in the context of Europe, for European cities in this case. And let's say we were also able to specify better the link within each, let's say, indicator with the related SDG and also with the related target, and also, let's say, balance better the distribution of indicators we selected in the first edition, not only to cover the environmental, social, and economic dimensions of the indicators, but also the institutional one, which was less addressed in the first edition. And also for the quality dimension, we refined, also thanks to the work done with the 6 pilot cities, the quality of the indicators included in the handbook. As a result, in 2 months from now, we will present at the World Urban Forum in Katowice the new edition of the European Handbook. As for the selection of indicators we include and we suggest for cities to use, we didn't increase so much the number of indicators. We had 71 in the first edition. We will have 72 in this new version. But among those, actually, we will continue to have both official indicators and experimental indicators. We will continue also to have both harmonized and non-harmonized indicators. Why? Because for us it's really crucial that cities and regions can both tackle their local situation and compare themselves with other cities. And our European framework, let's say, is useful in this respect, also to allow cities, for example, not only to compare with other cities in the same country, but also try to, let's say, have a more European perspective. And as I said before, the work, the results from the work on the Leave No One Behind also allowed us to inspire better this framework. And from the 71 indicators we had in the first handbook, now we have 72. And among those, 17 indicators of the old framework have been deleted, 10 replaced, and 19 added. The criterion behind these choices, of course, were, as you can see in the, you will see in the next slides, have been based, let's say, on the availability of data, on the easiness, on the let's say, possibility for local administration to handle them. So the new version of the European Handbook will maintain the same structure as the first edition. So we'll have for every goal, it's very easy to use instruments. You have for every goal a description of the goal, a contextualization of the goal in the European context, and also, let's say, an interpretation of the goal as for the local dimension. So why that goal is important for cities and regions, why that goal covers areas of competence of the local administration, so that local administration can really implement policies in order to improve towards the achievement of that goal. As for the indicators, also in that case, the structure through which we presented the indicators remain more or less the same. We just added more information on the disaggregation, as I said before, from the project on the Leave No One Behind, and also more information on the API and visualization, because from the work with the 6 pilot cities emerged that for cities, VLR should be something that can be published periodically, every 1-2 years. So there should be a way to make the process of data collection and data interpretation, which is more straightforward and less also expensive to be sustainable. As for the selection of indicators, here we put 2 examples of indicators, one which was kept. As I said before, this gender employment gap, for example, is an indicator which is official from Eurostat. It's provided with the European 27 now coverage, and for cities and greater cities. This is still very relevant because in Europe there is still a gender employment gap which is about 11%. There have been lots of policies and strategies implemented in these last years. For example, in 2020, the EU Gender Equality Strategy. So it's something which is still worth to have in the framework. While, for example, in the next slides, you can see that this is an example of indicators we decided to drop in this new edition of the European Handbook, the tree cover density. Why? Because this indicator was provided by European Environmental Agency with a disaggregation which was really high. So with the density of trees was provided for every, let's say, square of the European territory. And but this made it very difficult for cities to calculate, let's say, the density in their local administration, because some geographical information system capabilities to manage these GIS techniques were not available in all the cities. So we try to, for example, suggest to cities to use an easier indicator, but still very relevant. The newly planted trees, which comes from administrative records, is official, and it's, let's say, easy to monitor. And finally, the last, let's say, one of the last improvements, because the European Handbook also collects much more results we have been working upon in the last years, is the fact that actually in the Urban Data Platform Plus, which is the platform in which we upload all the studies and also data we have for the urban and regional level across Europe, we will also, this platform will also be integrated with the data and indicators we are proposing in this new version of the European Handbook. So all the cities and regions that would like to immediately, let's say, have a one-stop shop to compare themselves with other cities and understand which kind of data are already there, they can go on the website and download, let's say, data directly from there. So to make the effort less difficult. I will now give again the floor back to Alice, who will tell you a bit more instead about what we are doing for the regional level. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Paola. I will go quickly through that because, as you, Paola, mentioned, our analysis focus mostly on cities and less on regions, while in this next step of the project that will kick off in the next months, we will focus also on the regional level. So with the project, and actually this has been fostered through different studies that we have been running in the last year, especially on the multi-level governance. I will leave all the reference in the presentation for you if you are interested in having a look. But basically, the main point is that we realized it over time that there is a whole SDG ecosystem that needs to be in place. And in some regions, and especially in regions that take the lead on the implementation of the agenda. This has been very developed in quite an advanced way. We also, as I mentioned before, there are some regional, subnational governments that already measured the SDGs, but there is still lack of, Paola, can you switch off your mic, please? There is still lack of a harmonized set, let's say, or indication on which indicators to use also for regions. So the European Parliament proposed this project and put some money. So this project will be executed by us in partnership with Eurostat and DG Regio, but also, of course, with the contribution of other services of the Commission. And the target is to involve the regions and pilot a set of indicators for regions in 10 EU regions. The goal, of course, is to engage regions in the process of monitoring, but also to increase the local ownership of the SDGs, increasing openness and transparencies on the data. For example, this is a collateral effect of the monitoring, but very important in our opinion. And of course, to have an assessment of policy impact also in a proper way, comparable as mentioned before. So the results will be a proposal for a harmonized set of indicators at the regional level. Of course, we hope that this will lead to an increased knowledge and capacity of EU regions to monitor and report on the SDGs, but also to foster a participatory process in localizing the SDGs in general. We will define the methodology, we will select the regions, and then we will test the methodology with this region. And the goal is by end of 2023 to propose this set with already some test phase done. Just to be clear, the target for us is the NUTS2 level, geographical in terms of let's say, geographical administrative boundaries. We will open a call for regions that will be willing to participate, but I want to be very clear, we will not give money directly to the regions, because this is by special rules of the JRC is basically forbidden at the moment. But we will task experts that will cooperate with the regions to collect the data, analyze the information in cooperation with the regions. Of course, we will also provide capacity building to the regions and to the administration to have a sort 10 regional reports that assess in a similar way the achievement of the SDGs for the pilot regions. And of course, we will summarize the conclusion of this work and the refinement of the methodology at the end. So with this, we conclude.